A worst case scenario situation just occurred to anybody who carries a gun for personal defense. And these things do happen, and this exact situation is why some people justify not carrying at all, because they're afraid that somebody might take their gun. And what just happened was that a man was killed on a bus with his own gun in an Atlanta hostage situation. And there's some lessons to be learned here and some takeaways that we're going to talk about after I give you the information. But this scenario was very strange, but also is going to be leveraged against gun owners and anybody who wants to defend themselves from that type of a scenario. So keep this in mind as we move forward. And I want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, I can get out here, give you information like this, give you some things to think about when it comes to your own personal defense, and I have the equipment and the ammunition required to get out on the range and make it happen. So big thanks to Midway USA. Now, on June 12th, a Gwinnett County transit bus was hijacked and 16 people on board were taken hostage after the suspect, Joseph Greer, got into an argument with another passenger who was Ernest Bird. Now, Bird pulled out a gun during the argument, and that gun was taken by Joseph Greer. Joseph Greer was a convicted felon, so he didn't have a gun and technically couldn't have one legally anyway, but he acquired one because in a fight, someone pulled a gun out that he was able to take away. Now, Greer used the gun to threaten all the hostages, and he shot Ernest Bird fatally in the leg, okay? He also used the gun to force the bus driver on a police chase. And as they ran from the police, lots of different tactics were used by the police to try to stop the bus and, of course, to rescue the hostages. And even one Georgia State Patrol trooper shot the engine of the bus with his patrol rifle and eventually disabled it. So that worked, but this was after the bus was already ramming police cars and police were using things like spike strips and all kinds of stuff was happening, okay? Now, this all just happened right after another shooting incident occurred at a food court in Atlanta, where the suspect, Joseph Greer, was at. And in fact, he was interviewed by the media about that said shooting. So he was there and he actually talked to the press, and what he said was really interesting considering what happened right thereafter. He told the press that he couldn't get a gun because he had prison time. He was a convicted felon with 19 prior arrests. And that he sized up the gunman involved in that shooting at the food court and thought he probably could have grabbed the gun away from him had it been a pistol. Which is interesting because right after that, a guy pulled a pistol on him that he took and used it against him. So maybe he was right, but that doesn't mean he was in the right. Now, this situation was very strange and very indicative of a few things that we need to keep in mind when it comes to self-defense. So what are the key takeaways here? Well, first off, number one is get more training. You have to get training, and then you have to keep getting more and more training after that because it just doesn't really end. Right? And now we can go online and watch YouTube videos and get all this good information about how to do drills and how to better prepare ourselves to use firearms in a defensive scenario. And that's good, and it's a good place to start. But you really need that hands-on experience from a real trainer who has real experience in teaching others and has that know-how when it comes to dealing with not only how to pull out a gun and shoot it, but how to deal with a fight, how to deal with being assaulted. It's not always just about getting A-zone hits. When someone's attacking you, it's not the same as shooting at cardboard. So having someone teach you how to deal with those scenarios is probably a good idea, especially if there's someone who doesn't do all this stuff and everything else you might see. We're not going to get into that. You know what I'm talking about. Now, the other thing that was a good takeaway from this event, which you should learn from, is the fact that most likely Ernest Bird brandishing this gun wasn't justified in the moment. You don't pull your gun out unless there's an immediate threat to your life, right? Now, we don't know. Maybe threats were said. Maybe Joseph Greer posed a threat to his life. We don't know because we weren't there. But the fact that he didn't shoot Joseph Greer and the fact that Joseph Greer was able to take Ernest Bird's gun away from him does allude to the idea that maybe Ernest Bird wasn't necessarily serious about using the weapon once it was pulled. And that is something that you should never do. You don't brandish a firearm unless you have intent to use it. Now, there are a lot of stories and there's a lot of situations out there that have occurred where someone has stopped a crime by holding a perpetrator at gunpoint without having to actually engage that person and pull the trigger. And there are scenarios where that might be the most reasonable action to take. But in this situation, the level of either inaction on Ernest Bird's part, or the fact that he might have known personally that him pulling that gun out wasn't necessarily justified at the time, led to him not only losing control of the firearm, but also being taken out by his own firearm. So you have to make sure that you have your thought processes in order for when it would be appropriate to brandish or use a firearm in a defensive scenario, in order to avoid creating that space and that time that Joseph Greer was allowed to then react to it and disarm Ernest Bird. Another thing to keep in mind is that you hear this a lot, especially when it comes to people who are criticizing the police, right? Why didn't they just shoot him in the leg? Why don't you just aim for the leg? Why don't you just disable him? Why did they have to kill him, right? Getting shot in the leg can and will often kill you. And that's what happened to Ernest Bird. He was shot in the leg. And like I said before, it's possible that the suspect did that with intent of not necessarily ending his life. Maybe it was to show he meant business. Maybe it was to show a level of seriousness, a level of intent, and the fact that he was willing to actually pull that trigger, right? It makes the hostages as well as the bus driver take you more seriously. But Ernest Bird still died from that wound. So the whole argument of shooting people in the leg to avoid killing them and just stopping the crime or whatever else it is that you're trying to avoid is a stupid argument. You can die from being shot in your leg just as easily as anywhere else, right? There's a lot of arteries in your legs. Well, not a lot, I guess, but there are arteries in your legs, okay? You will bleed out and you will die. So let's just get rid of that argument. Now, another thing that this taught us is that, well, obviously, gun laws don't work. And why is that? Well, this person was a felon who still ended up with a gun, even though they obtained it illegally, and then used it against somebody and killed them. So even though there's law saying that guy can't have a gun, and even though now he is being charged with crimes of being a felon in possession of a firearm, did that stop that from happening? Of course not. People are going to do whatever they have to do in the moment, and it won't matter what the laws say at that time. So be aware of that. I know we say this all the time. I know we all know it's already true, but it's just one more example of that being the case. Now, another takeaway is that this whole situation will be used to persecute people who carry legally for self-defense. Because this demonstrated that someone carrying a pistol for self-defense can have it taken from them and then used against them, people will use that as justification to try to prevent you from carrying a gun for self-defense. It will be something they say is an obvious risk that's not worth the reward. So be prepared for events like this one to be used against you as someone who wants to defend themselves. We all know exactly how this all plays out. And of course, even the mayor of Atlanta, Dickens, literally said this was the result of too many people having guns in their hands. It's not the result of criminal behavior. It's not the result of somebody who had bipolar disorder that just witnessed a traumatic event and then immediately got on a bus and hijacked it, right? No, it's because too many people have guns in their hands. You can see exactly where the narrative is going to take this one. And just to kind of reiterate, don't forget the whole training thing. Get training from a professional that can teach you things more than just how to pull a gun out and shoot it, right? Understand how fights work, understand how to react in those situations. I don't have enough training. I need more training. You need more training. I have my own shooting range. I get out here, I shoot, I try my best to do what I can to improve. I can't necessarily demonstrate a lot of that on camera because I don't have a cameraman. I have a tripod. It's hard to have a tripod follow you around while you're moving from point A to point B and getting off the X and everything else. So I'm working on that, but as of right now, I'm a lone wolf, right? If you're a videographer in North Dakota, hit me up. But what I'm trying to say is that the training is more than just shooting guns, right? The training is how to deal with a fight, not just how to get holes on target on paper, right? And that's why we need training. And the people who are out there who say, I won't carry a gun because what if the bad guy takes it from me? Well, they just got the golden goose of stories to prove their point, to justify their inaction and their unwillingness to take their own security into their own responsibility, right? Because here's a story where that proves their point that, yeah, this guy, exactly the thing I was worried about. He had a gun, pulled it out, the guy took it from him and killed him with it. And so now those people are going to have a field day explaining to everyone else why concealed carry is a bad idea. The media is going to use it as a way to tell you why it's a bad idea. And now I'm sure members of the Congress and everything else in our government are going to move forward with why carrying guns by civilians is a bad idea. And this is a great example for them to use when they're trying to make that argument. So these are the takeaways from this event. That's why this event, it got a lot of coverage compared to other things that were happening at the exact same time, specifically because it can be leveraged against gun owners. Not because of what happened being so traumatic or atrocious. Obviously what happened to Ernest Byrd is very sad, and of course, you know, we feel for his family and everyone else who's mourning him at this time. And we don't want to see that happen to people who were just trying to ride a bus, right? But we don't know what started that fight. We don't know what led up to that altercation, and we don't know if the brandishing of the firearm was justified or not. A lot of speculation is what we're discussing right now because we need to learn from this event and not concern ourselves overly with the minutia. But regardless, this is being publicized because of how they can use it against you, which is why I wanted to bring it to your attention, because you might not even have heard about it, but somebody who doesn't like you carrying a gun for self-defense probably has, and now they have another reason for why you probably shouldn't. So let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are about this whole situation. How would you handle a scenario like that? There's a fight, an argument, someone pulls a gun out. You can't blame the other guy for trying to take the gun away, right? But regardless of if he was the aggressor or not, that's what's going to happen. Are you training to the level where you could prevent that from happening to you? And are you capable of avoiding these types of scenarios by removing yourself from environments or situations where this becomes more probable, right? That's something you definitely need to be considering when you're planning how you get to work, how you get home, everything else regarding personal security and situational awareness. Now, listen, I honestly think that this story is going to be used maliciously against gun owners. But I will say that I carry a gun every day. And there's a reason why I carry a relatively large pistol compared to some people's standards. This is a Glock 19X with a 19 Gen 5 slide on it. There's stuff going on here. It's Glock 45, whatever you want to call it. But the reason I have this gun and I use this gun is because I can actually shoot well with it. I can actually move well with it. I actually have a full purchase on it, which means taking it from me would be very difficult. And I can control the recoil and the point of impact that this weapon provides because of its size and just the overall purchase I get on the firearm. So because of that, things like the story I just told you about become less of a concern when it's something that I've thought about and trained about and everything else, right? And that's why we all need to keep training and learning more and more and more. And honestly, I know that this isn't the easiest gun for everybody out there to carry, but I also know that it's a gun that would be really difficult to get out of my hands, let's just say. So let me know your thoughts down below. I'm gonna hit a couple of A zones here and we're gonna call it a wrap, okay? I mean, maybe I did. Let's find out. Sorry about all the wind. It is North Dakota, so I did say a couple of A zones, and I think I was pretty spot on with that. Let's see. I can't even see the camera right now. So we got 1, 2, 3. Can't even see that one, can you? There you go. I can do better than that. We were at about 20 yards when I shot that. Let's see where we're at over here. That's an A zone, that's a C. I'm pretty sure I shot 3 at each target, so that's concerning. I'll go back and look at the footage. If you see 3, let me know. If I shot 2, also let me know. That's gonna be it for Magic Prepper.